PowerPlayChess, brought to you in association with Kagi. When Magnus Carlsen is at the chessboard, we need to pay attention, and the world number one was back in action in Kolkata at the Tata Steel Rapid and in the Tata Steel Blitz Championship. So I've selected a game that he played in the Rapid tournament. So that's 25 minutes on the clock plus 10 seconds a move. So, a reasonably sensible time control. Not classical chess, but still, long enough. So he's playing black against Arjun Erigaisi, the man of the moment. I mean, he's just on sensational form. Now, Erigaisi, I wouldn't say that Rapid is his particular forte. Nevertheless, obviously, he's on impressive form. So this was going to be a test for Magnus Carlsen. So let's see what happened. This is just a fantastic game, actually. Really exciting. And not one of those endgame grinds that sometimes we see from Carlsen. Well, for a start, we've got an open Sicilian. Interesting to see Carlsen playing with e6, playing the so-called Taimanov variation. Of course, a very respectable variation for black. And over the last couple of years, he's favoured this in certain games. So he's fairly experienced with it. Interesting to see he's gone for this rather than, let's say, the very highly theoretical Najdorf, for example, which he has played in the past. I think theory in the Taimanov is still a little bit fluid. There's it's not like the Najdorf variation, for example. Now, there are many ways that white can play here. You could play bishop e2 and hope to transpose back into Scheveningen. You could play bishop d3. You can go queen f3, queen d2, g4, but a3 from Erigaisi. Okay, that's a fairly tame way to play. Ruling out bishop b4, but of course, well, as I've noted on many occasions, a3 doesn't really contribute to white's development. And Carlsen simply exchanged on d4 and played b5. So it's not actually the most popular way of playing the position, but of course very straightforward and typical of the opening. You simply want to bring that bishop to the long diagonal. It's not if you don't play d6, then the bishop isn't going to go out there. The bishop is definitely best placed on the long diagonal. So bishop e2, bishop b7, and castles. I want to show you one very interesting idea, that if white castles kingside here, then it's possible to force an exchange of queens with queen d6. It's a very strange move. But often in these kind of Sicilian positions, black doesn't have any difficulties once the queens are exchanged. And Carlsen has used that maneuver previously, not in that exact position, but I can imagine that he would be very happy to go into an endgame, because often there are strategic advantages to having an extra centre pawn. Castles queenside instead from Erigaisi. Of course, it's the sharpest continuation, and of course there is no chance of exchanging the queens now with queen d6 because of the rook on d1. But rook c8, of course, is very logical, and this shows that castling queenside is a double-edged decision because there's already some pressure on the c-file. King b1, sensible, steps out of the line of fire. It would be nice for black to take here and then take here, but of course that's just not possible with queen takes g7 available. So knight f6, and now black can start thinking about this kind of thing. So white has to react, possibly defending the e-pawn, but, well, for example, after bishop f3, one could play e5, that stabilizes the middle, and then b4. Now this is the problem when you play a3, that you can see lines are opening. Now there's no immediate danger for the king. Nevertheless, I think black can be very happy with this once you castle and you start transferring the rooks to the B and C files. So e5 played by Erigaisi. The knight hops into the middle. Knight takes. Now don't take on c2. That would be a mistake because white is going to play rook c1. So just bishop takes d5. But this is the kind of position that black often reaches in the Taimanov, where that pawn has come to b5. The early development of the bishop to the long diagonal then allows the bishop to sit on d5. And you can see that c4 is under control. Very important. So that white can't push that bishop out of the way. And that gives black a real foothold in the middle. That beautiful bishop pointing in both directions and shutting out white's pressure on the d file. So in many cases, it would be desirable for white to exchange off bishops. But yeah, at the moment it's not possible. Well, for a start, now black could well be threatening to take here. So first of all, that's defended. And I think already Carlsen strategically is very comfortable here. He could just play bishop c5. As I mentioned before, often endgames are quite pleasant for black. You know, with that king sitting in the middle behind the pawns, the second rook coming over, perhaps to organise a break with b4. And there's even a possibility perhaps to break with f6 when the king's in the middle. You know, that is a superb piece on d5. But Carlsen played really ambitiously here. I think he would have been very happy with bishop c5, but he saw something else, and I think this shows the kind of frame of mind he was in. He grabbed that pawn on g2. Really risky, because, well, he donates several moves for white for a start. You know, the bishop is back where it started on d5. I mean, it's a good position, but you can see white has a semi-open file here, and white simply gains time. So that is a really courageous decision from Carlsen, but he figures he can withstand white's attack. But it looks frightening with, you know, these pieces pointing in this direction, the h-pawn following, and perhaps white's queen just slipping over as well to the king side. g6. I mean, I have to say that exchanging pieces instead of taking that pawn looks like kind of a more sensible option. But this is extraordinary from Carlsen. Really courageous. You know, he plays so ambitiously. h5. So white is building up. I think Carlsen's next move, for me, is very surprising. Rook f8. I mean, it's hard to even sort of divine exactly what he had in mind with this move, actually. I mean, potentially, he might be thinking, well, maybe he can slip out with the king sometimes and this pawn is defended. Perhaps he simply had in mind that if h takes, then you can recapture with the f-pawn. And then that pawn is defended. And, you know, there's potentially, you know, some pressure on the f-file. And actually the king is safe. The king, again, might slip out to the queen side if necessary. But I think a really unusual move. It certainly isn't necessary. Bishop d4 played by Erigaisi. So I think he's defending this one and perhaps looking to move the queen in. That's a possibility. He could have exchanged off bishops here. I wonder whether that might have been a better option, because this is such a powerful piece. Anyway, bishop d4, queen b7. So you can see Carlsen really takes control of that diagonal, and there is no chance that white is getting in bishop e4. That bishop is so strong on d5. But it's so double-edged because black's king is still in the middle. And there's another reason for queen b7. b4. Carlsen is in a hurry. This is so typical of him. If he sees an idea, he carries it out. He's just going for it, using that hook of the pawn on a3 to open up the b file. He doesn't need to be so fast, actually. He could play a5 and then b4. But like I said, a very clear strategy from Carlsen, even though he gives away that a pawn. But he's not worried. He just wants to open lines. And, well, there is no doubt that the initiative has well and truly swung in black's favour. So you can see open b file here. Now that is protected. And in fact, Carlsen switches. After bishop e2, the bishop came back. Then he went to a8. I mean, he could have played rook a8 straight away. In any case, this is a really difficult position for white to play now with these open files. But Erigaisi did well. First of all, b3, so that allows the bishop to cover these squares. Queen a5, and the bishop dropped back to b2. So a check. King came to c1, rook c8. Really dangerous for white. You can see bishop takes b3 threatened, because now there's a pin. There's also potentially bishop a3 as well, because c2 is hanging. So c4, the king is opening up, but at the moment, white has enough cover here. These pawns are protected. And black's king's in the middle. I mean, it would be fantastic for black if rook number 2 could somehow leap over, but at the moment those rooks are split. Now, the battle is raging. So far, Erigaisi has held off Carlsen's queenside attack. Material is now even, 5 pawns each. How do you continue with black? So, time for me to have a drink. Cheers. Time for you to have a think. Black to play. What did Carlsen do next? Now, if you get this next move, I'll be very impressed. Let me know if you found this. Write it in the chat. Write it in the comments below the video. Black to play. Cheers, folks. Well, I have to say I would consider bishop a3 in this position, just to clear away this defender. In fact, this is still okay for white. The king is just about safe enough. Black actually doesn't have more than perpetual in this position. So it's not bishop a3. The move Carlsen played was g takes h5. Wow! What a gutsy move. He just grabbed a pawn. Now, if bishop takes pawn, I guess that's the move we would like to make, then bishop takes c4, and you can see if that's taken, then the queen is in trouble. But incredibly, the computer thinks that white can struggle on here like this, although has to be said, black is better here. But if white doesn't take that, then this pawn can actually be very useful. And suddenly white is split between two sides. So the game went queen d4, h4, now that's protected by the bishop. Rook came to h3. Yeah, for the record, before anyone else points it out, rook c3 is preferred by machines. I mean, to me it looks like a very unnatural move, sort of blocking in that bishop. I would take black every time in this position, just because white pieces don't look great, and somehow, black is very solid here. Anyway, rook h3 played, excuse me, and now rook g8. That rook enters the game on an open file, and this really shows that the initiative has swung over to black. King c2, queen a8. Wow. Coming back to look down the diagonal, and so this bishop has access to e4. Rook c3. In this case, it's definitely a blunder. White could have played on with rook a1, but bishop e4 check, and this is an absolute killer. If king d2, bishop c5, traps the queen. Very unfortunate. If king c1, bishop g5 check, and that rook has to interpose, and clearly that's bad for white. Bishop d3 played. Bishop f3 hits the rook. Queen c6. White's pieces are in an absolute jam. Well, for starters, bishop b4 is threatened. And don't forget the threat simply to advance that rook's pawn, and guided by these pieces, white is in massive trouble. And there's also, for example, bishop a3, rook g4, which doesn't help matters for white. Bishop h7 played, rook g2, an exchange of bishops, and h3, and that pawn will be decisive. And rook g1. That pawn is potentially going all the way, so that was taken. Black is now a rook up, and here's a nice finish from Carlsen. So bishop g6 played. Erigaisi is a whole rook down. Still possible for white to go wrong. For black to go wrong. If pawn takes bishop, then that is actually a draw by perpetual. So what did Carlsen play? Very cool winning move. King d8. That king just slipped away. If it's checked, then it just comes to c7. And there is no danger at all. Black is a rook up. So Erigaisi resigned. You so often see in Sicilian positions where this shell of pawns, this hard shell, protects the king beautifully when it's still in the middle. Fantastic game from Carlsen. He played with such courage. First of all, bishop takes g2. Incredible. But he appreciated that because he had that security in the middle, he could get away with this. And then this amazing move as well. G takes h5. Again, he's secure enough in the middle, and that gave him the freedom to grab that pawn really cheekily, and that actually decided the game. Brilliant. Well, Carlsen won the rapid event, and then he went on to win the Blitz as well. So with those two titles, Magnus Carlsen has now won 10 tournaments in 2024. I'll give you the whole list if you like. I don't know if I've got them. Yeah, here we go. So Tata Steel India Blitz, Tata Steel India Rapid, the Julius Baer Generation Cup, Speed Chess Championship, chess.com, Norway Chess, Casablanca Chess, Grenka Classic, Warsaw Grand Chess Tour, Freestyle Chess, Chessable Masters. 10 tournament wins in 2024. For some people, 10 tournament wins in a lifetime would be good enough. He's just done that in 2024. Incredible stuff.